Welcome. Here's a quick recap on Bridgerton Season 1. In London, young ladies trapped in tight corsets and dresses are presented by their mamas to the Queen. Whichever one she finds pleasing, the Queen chooses as the season's diamond, automatically making her the most sought-after maiden of the season. Now, a few things you must know about this little London. There comes a special season where young women ripe for marriage are paraded by their families to find worthy suitors. A lady is groomed to marry, nothing more. It's frowned upon for a woman from a reputable home to do anything else except be a lady. She's never to be found with a man unchaperoned and must ensure she finds a suitor before the end of the season. A ghostwriter by the name Lady Whistledown invests in writing the juiciest gossips, secrets, and scandals. No one knows who the writer is, but she certainly has the people's heart as they look forward to her prince. But this story is about the Bridgertons, a family of 8. Anthony, Benedict, Colin, Gregory, and the girls Daphne, Eloise, Francesca, and Hyacinth, with the widowed Viscountess Lady Bridgerton. Daphne, the eldest daughter of the Bridgerton family, earns the title of the season's diamond by the Queen. She absolutely loves it as she's looked forward to it all her life. The same can't be said for her sister Eloise, who wishes never to be in Daphne's shoes. On the other hand are the Featheringtons, a family of 3, Prudence, Philippa, and Penelope, with parents Archibald Featherington, a very ambitious man, and Portia Featherington, a woman too smart for her own good. She's chaperoning all 3 daughters in the season, unlike Lady Bridgerton, who's only presented one child and saves the other for the next season. A distant family member, Miss Marina Thompson, joins the Featheringtons for the season, and Miss Featherington is not pleased because she's beautiful, graceful, and poised, unlike her daughters. Meanwhile, the Duke of Hastings, Simon, arrives at Lady Danbury's castle, a respectable socialite. She's to host a ball that evening and begs he attends, much to his dismay as he will be swarmed with mamas who would throw their daughters at him, since he's the most eligible bachelor in town. It's time for the ball and the guests have arrived, each maiden with her chaperone, mothers and fathers looking out for advantageous matches. Anthony chaperones his sister for the night and does a mean job warding off every suitor. While Daphne isn't getting any luck, Miss Marina has a swarm of suitors flocking around her, including one of the Bridgerton brothers, Colin. This does not go well with Miss Featherington, who wishes it were her daughters. As soon as the Duke enters the ball, the mamas spare no mercy as expected. Daphne manages to escape her brother, but an encounter with an odd suitor has her running back to him. She bumps into Simon and tries conversing with him to ward off the gentleman, but Simon thinks it's just a ploy to get his attention. They're about to argue when Anthony interrupts. He and the Duke are old friends. He helps lighten the mood and they go their separate ways. Daphne doesn't seem to like the Duke. He neither. After a ball, interested suitors visit the homes of their preferred maiden with a proposal. The family will choose whichever suitor they wish to proceed courtship. Daphne is blessed with lots of suitors, but her brother Anthony keeps warding them off. But over at the Featheringtons, luck has shown on Miss Marina Thompson, who has suitors lined up at the Featherington home for her hand and none for the Featherington sisters. Lady Featherington is rather displeased. For the Queen's diamond Daphne, this is bad because if the Queen's choice is not married by the end of the season, it means the Queen is wrong and she hates being wrong. Plus, the ghostwriter Lady Whistledown spares no chance to make mockery of the Queen. Anthony and Simon catch up on old times. Both wish not to get married, but Anthony mocks Simon, saying he's at liberty because he has brothers to carry on the family name, should he not, unlike Simon, who's an only child. Meanwhile, Colin Bridgerton has won the heart of Miss Marina Thompson, while Daphne has no luck keeping any suitors. Lady Danbury connives with Lady Bridgerton to try and match Daphne with the Duke. Lady Bridgerton extends an invitation to Simon for dinner at their home, but Daphne and Simon still share the same sentiments towards each other. Also, Anthony does not support the alliance given his friend's Ori lifestyle, which he is also accustomed to. After an argument with his mother later that night, Anthony breaks off the relationship with his lover, an opera singer, a regular girl from the street, to do right by his family as the eldest son. It's expected as the Viscount to court and marry a lady from a respectable home and, most importantly, avoid a scandal. On a lighter note, Colin Bridgerton and Penelope Featherington are good friends, but it's more than friendship for Penelope. Anthony chooses Lord Berbrook, an older man, as Daphne's husband, having checked his background and how advantageous the union would be for both families. but Daphne won't hear of it. Meanwhile, Lady Featherington finds out Miss Marina is pregnant. Daphne is approached by Lord Berbrooke, who tries to force himself on her. She knocks him out before Simon, who noticed, gets to them. He's awfully impressed at her, so he proposes to form a fake alliance. If people see them together, the mamas will leave him alone, and the suitors will once again be interested in Daphne. Suitors would follow whoever the most eligible bachelor wants. They just need to give Lady Whistledown something to write about, making him look unavailable and she desirable. They do not have to like each other, they just need to appear madly in love. As expected, all eyes are on them as they take the dance floor, and Lady Whistledown takes the bait. A brief story about Simon. On the night he was born, his mother died, but his late father, the Duke of Hastings, was only happy he had a son. Unfortunately, Simon had a speaking disability. His father could not stand having a son who wasn't okay, so he kept him hidden while he tried to shape him into the son he wanted. When he couldn't, he treated the boy like an outcast. Lady Danbury, who was a friend to Simon's mother, took charge of the boy's welfare and helped him overcome his disability, hence his love and respect for her. While the Featheringtons are looking for a way to solve their little baby situation, Daphne and Simon are doing a good job at fooling everyone. As planned, Daphne has become the most sought-out maiden again. Her mother is overjoyed, but Anthony is enraged. He sends all the suitors away, still standing on his choice for Daphne. He warns Simon as well, but he won't listen. Meanwhile, Penelope tries to be friends with Miss Marina while curious of how she got pregnant. You see, the mamas have prepared these young girls for marriage all their lives, but haven't taught them the slightest thing about marriage and the duties of a wife to her husband. Now the queen, in need of juicy gist, calls for Lady Bridgerton to find out what's happening to her diamond. While Anthony tries to keep Simon away from his sister, Simon tells him of Lord Berbrooke's rendezvous with Daphne. So, Anthony cancels the engagement immediately. Lord Berbrooke insists on marrying Daphne because he needs the connection. When Simon doesn't yield, Berbrooke lets his tongue wag far too much to earn him a beating. Meanwhile, Penelope and Eloise embark on the search of how girls get pregnant. After getting a beating from Simon, Lord Berbrooke threatens to spill that Daphne was alone with him, unchaperoned in the dark. The family now worries for their reputation should they reject his proposal to marry in 3 days. Lady Bridgerton honors the invitation of the Queen, who hints her to do whatever it takes to marry the Duke and Daphne. So she takes it upon herself to solve their little situation with Berbrooke. She invites Lord Berbrooke's mother for tea, while her maids get info from the lady's maid. They find out Lord Berbrooke has a son whom he's refusing to take responsibility for. The ladies spread the news immediately to get Lady Whistledown's attention, and they succeed. The info is enough to send Lord Berbrooke out of town. Simon and Daphne are back to their ruse, and they seem to be enjoying each other's company way too much. Lady Danbury notices Simon's hesitation with Daphne and asks what bothers him. He thinks of when he promised his father on his deathbed never to marry or have children who will carry on the family name just to spite him. Meanwhile, Daphne's having a hard time finding the perfect match from the lineup of suitors. On the other hand, Lady Featherington instructs Miss Marina to find herself a suitor at once and pin the baby on him before he realizes. Daphne gets curious about Simon's decision not to marry and asks Anthony, who has no idea. Meanwhile, a dashing prince, Frederick from Russia, the Queen's nephew, has joined in the search for a bride, and the town swarms him like a feast. The prince has an eye for Daphne, but she's rather distracted by someone else. The Queen encourages the prince to pursue her still. Daphne's curiosity of what happens between a husband and wife heightens, so she picks Simon's brain, who is rather surprised at how little mothers tell their daughters. Meanwhile, Lady Danbury wants him to give way to the prince if he is not serious with Daphne. It would be a shame for her to lose such a worthy suitor. Eloise and Benedict are two Bridgertons who fell far from the tree. Eloise is interested in uncovering the identity of Lady Whistledown and hopes to be like her, to nurture her mind rather than fish for suitors. Benedict has got his issues too. The patterned life is not for him. Simon takes Lady Danbury's advice and ends his arrangement with Daphne. He also encourages her to give the prince a chance. Daphne is devastated. Meanwhile, Lady Featherington forges a letter from Miss Marina's baby daddy saying he has no interest in her nor the baby, to encourage her to find a suitor immediately. And it works. Daphne, in hopes of moving on, makes a grand entrance into a ball, catching the eye of everyone in the room. The prince proceeds to ask for a dance and she quickly obliges. The queen is pleased at the sight of the two, but the duke seems rather upset. He spends his days sparring with the sack at the boxing ring, while Daphne can't seem to forget him. Lady Featherington tries hard enough to marry Miss Marina off to an old man before her belly starts showing, but the girl would rather not. After spending quality time with Daphne, Prince Frederick requests Anthony's permission to propose to Daphne, who is rather tongue-tied when asked what she thinks. Her mother still wishes she ends up with the Duke, so she comes clean and tells her about their little plan. Meanwhile, over at Danbury Castle, Lady Danbury tries to talk some sense into Simon, who is packing up to leave London. Simon shows up at a soiree to have a word with Daphne, and as soon as they're alone, they kiss. Anthony walks in on them and immediately demands Simon marry his sister for defiling her honor, but he refuses instantly. Anthony declares they have a duel to the death instead. Miss Marina has chosen Colin Bridgerton as her target to marry and pin the pregnancy on him. Penelope, who's secretly in love with her friend Colin, doesn't like that, but refrains from saying anything since she and Marina have grown close. Daphne tries to talk Anthony out of the duel, but his mind is made up. Meanwhile, it appears the Featheringtons have another problem. They are broke. Lord Featherington gambled away most of their property. Daphne rides into the middle of the duel between Simon and Anthony. She believes they were seen by someone else while they kissed and begs the Duke to marry her or risk her never getting married over a scandal. Simon says he cannot marry her because he will not be able to give her children. Daphne decides to let go of her dreams and save her reputation instead. She agrees to marry the Duke regardless. She informs her mother of her engagement with the Duke and she is enthralled. The Queen, not so much, as Lady Whistledown mocks her for thinking she could match her nephew the prince with the season's diamond. Penelope tries to disrupt the courting between Marina and Colin but has no luck. Meanwhile, the prince makes his peace with Daphne's choice. The wedding is rushed, slated to happen in a few days before tongues wag, but the queen influences the Pope, who does not grant their request. Lady Danbury suggests they give the queen a bit of attention. It should get things sailing smoothly in no time. They take the lady's initiative and surprising to Daphne, the Duke speaks so much of her as though he were in love. The queen agrees to give them license to wed, and so Daphne and Duke marry immediately. At the wedding, Eloise is busy investigating the identity of Lady Whistledown. The queen overhears her discussion and encourages her to unmask the writer soon. Daphne and Simon are barely talking to each other for a married couple. Meanwhile, Lady Bridgerton attempts to explain what happens between a man and woman on their wedding night to Daphne, but still cannot find the right words. Daphne and Simon say their goodbyes as they take an awkward ride to the inn where they'll be lodging for the night. Simon requests separate rooms for both of them, but the two can't seem to fall asleep. Simon goes to her room and they both confess their feelings and consummate their marriage. While Daphne is off on her honeymoon, Colin announces his engagement to Miss Marina, much to the surprise of his family. Anthony tries to talk him out of it, but the young chap is determined. Marina tries to make peace with Penelope, but the girl is so pissed. Meanwhile, Lady Bridgerton tries to prune Eloise into the perfect lady to get her ready for the next season, which is difficult given Eloise's personality. While the Featheringtons have dinner at the Bridgerton mansion, Penelope tries to share Marina's secret with Colin, but he doesn't listen. She also tries persuading Marina from marrying Colin, but the girl's mind is made up. Daphne, on the other hand, is just settling into her new role, doing her best to understand her new home, the people, and most especially her husband. There she realizes how a woman comes to be with child. All along she thought Simon was impotent. Meanwhile, things take an ugly turn for Miss Marina as Lady Whistledown publishes the news of her pregnancy. How she discovered, no one knows. Honeymoon's over for the newlyweds after Daphne's discovery. Both can't stand each other. News of Marina's scandal gives Daphne the perfect excuse to rush back to her family, but Simon follows suit. The Bridgertons try to shield themselves from getting attached to the scandal by using Daphne and Simon's presence, showing up at events together, while the Featheringtons are treated as outcasts. Daphne, understanding Marina's situation, extends a helping hand to Miss Marina to help find the father of her baby. While she's off at Lady Danbury's hangout, Anthony and Simon get into a fistfight at the bar. Later that night, while Daphne tends to his wounds, Simon tells Daphne about his vow to never continue his father's bloodline, which leaves her utterly disappointed in him. They decide to part ways once the season is over. Meanwhile, Daphne was able to pull pull some strings to get Marina's lover, but unfortunately, his brother Philip showed up with news of his passing. Marina is broken by the news. Philip offers to marry her in his brother's place, but she refuses. Meanwhile, little Miss Detective Eloise is on to Madame Delacroix, the modiste, thinking she's Lady Whistledown. While Simon is off attending a match, Daphne searches the house for any clues as to why Simon hates his father so much. Lady Danbury explains to her how Simon was never loved by his father, no matter how much he tried to prove his worth to him. Meanwhile, Mr. Featherington cashes out on the match after striking a bargain with one of the players to lose. The money is enough to set the struggling family up again. Daphne changes towards Simon after her chat with Lady Danbury. She invites him to the Bridgerton mansion and they have a wonderful time together. They decide to host a ball and invite the ton, including the Featheringtons, regardless of the scandal. It's a fine evening until the ball is disrupted by the rain, which sends the guests home, while Daphne and Simon have a heart-to-heart conversation. Lady Featherington and her daughters return home to a shock. Mr. Featherington is dead. While misfortune visits their home, Daphne and Simon finally mend their issues and decide to stay together. Well, the season is finally over. Miss Marina, left with no choice, accepts Philip's proposal and leaves with him. Turns out Lord Featherington had mortgaged his estate, and so a new lord is set to take over his house. Meanwhile, the Bridgertons bid farewell to Colin, who sets out to travel and will be gone for long. Anthony finally decides to yield to his mother's pressure to settle down, while Eloise realizes Madame Delacroix, whom she believed to be Lady Whistledown, is in fact not. So much effort down the drain. Meanwhile, it is revealed that her beloved friend Penelope is Lady Whistledown. The season signs out with the Duke and Duchess welcoming their first child. Until the next season, the end. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Tune in for more movie moments.